Picture you and your family asleep in the dead of night. The house is still. The only sound is the soft rhythm of breathing. Then, a sudden noise shatters the silence. Thud. The floorboards creak under the weight of something heavy. Thud, again, but closer this time, followed by a slow, crushing sound like wood splintering under immense pressure. And then, you hear it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps, deliberate and slow, coming down the hall toward your bedroom door. The air in the room thickens with dread, as the doorknob twists with a metallic click, and the door swings open. A figure stands in the doorway, shadowed and monstrous, with something dark and wet dripping from one hand. In the other, you catch the gleam of steel as it rises, catching the moonlight. Your heart seizes in terror as you realize what it is: an axe. In the tranquil, unassuming town of Villisca, Iowa, the year was 1903. The Moore family, Josiah, his wife Sarah, and their 4 young children, lived in a modest yet cozy 3-bedroom home. To the outside world, they were the picture of small-town success. Josiah was a respected businessman, his family active members of the community, their lives centered around their faith and the local Presbyterian church. But this idyllic existence would soon be shattered by an evil so profound that it would leave a permanent scar on the town's collective memory. It was on the 9th of June, 1912, that the family attended a special service at their church. The congregation had gathered to hear a sermon from George Kelly, a visiting preacher whose words had stirred the hearts of those present. After the service, a social event was held for the children, a time of innocent laughter and shared joy. As the evening wore on and the clock neared 9:30 p.m., the Moore family, along with 2 young friends of their daughter Mary, Ina May and Lena Stillinger, decided it was time to head home. The walk back was uneventful, the night air cool and comforting, a stark contrast to what awaited them. The house stood quiet and still as they entered, the warmth of home welcoming them inside. The children, tired from the day's excitement, quickly prepared for bed. Little did they know that an unseen presence had already breached the sanctity of their home, lurking in the shadows, biding its time. The night deepened, and one by one, the household succumbed to sleep. It was then, under the cover of darkness, that the horror began. The intruder moved with a terrifying calm, methodical in his approach. His weapon of choice, a heavy axe, was raised high, and with a forceful swing it came down on the sleeping forms of Josiah and Sarah Moore. The blows were merciless, the sharp edge cutting through flesh and bone with horrifying precision. Josiah, the first to fall, received the brunt of the attack. The force was so great that the ceiling bore marks where the axe had swung wildly after each devastating strike. Sarah met a similar fate, though her end came with the blunt side of the weapon, as did the children's. The children, innocent and unsuspecting, lay defenseless as the intruder continued his grim work. Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, and Paul all met their end in the same brutal fashion as their parents. The axe, once an ordinary tool, had become an instrument of unimaginable horror. But the nightmare did not end there. Descending the stairs, the killer made his way to the guest bedroom where Ina and Lena Stillinger slept. Lena, the older of the 2 sisters, awoke to the sound of the intruder's approach. She had only moments to comprehend the terror unfolding around her. In a desperate, futile act, she raised her arms to protect herself, but the axe fell with relentless brutality. Her sister, Ina, remained unaware until the very last moment, her life snuffed out as she lay in peaceful slumber. What followed was an act of sheer, unfathomable evil. The killer, his bloodlust not yet sated, revisited each body, this time smashing their skulls into unrecognizable masses with the blunt end of the axe. It was a grotesque and ritualistic display of violence, a final assertion of dominance over his helpless victims. Each body was then carefully covered with a piece of clothing or a blanket, as if in a twisted attempt to restore some semblance of dignity to the lifeless forms he had so mercilessly destroyed. The house, now a tomb of slaughter, held one last bizarre twist. In the guest bedroom alongside the murder weapon, the killer left a slab of bacon, its purpose unclear, its presence unnerving. The kitchen bore signs that the intruder had lingered after the killings, perhaps to eat, perhaps to wash away the blood that clung to him. The wash basin was stained with crimson, a silent testament to the horrors that had occurred. Before leaving, the murderer took care to cover the mirrors, draping them with cloths as if he could not bear to see his own reflection, or perhaps to hide the carnage from any lingering spirits. He meticulously closed the windows and locked the front door, sealing the house as though it were a crypt, before vanishing into the night. The next morning the town of Villisca awoke, unaware of the tragedy that had befallen the Moore household. Mary Peckham, a neighbor, noticed the unusual quiet that hung over the house. The Moores were diligent in their daily chores, yet the chickens remained cooped, the horses unattended. A growing sense of unease prompted Peckham to approach the house. Finding the door locked and no response to her knocks, she called for help. Josiah's brother Ross Moore arrived and using his spare key unlocked the door. What he and Peckham found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. The Stillinger sisters lay cold and still in the guest bedroom, their small bodies a gruesome introduction to the horrors that awaited further inside. The police were summoned, but the damage was already done, both to the victims and the integrity of the crime scene. As investigators and townsfolk alike swarmed the house, evidence was trampled, vital clues lost in the chaos. The brutal nature of the killing shocked the nation, and the search for the perpetrator began in earnest. Suspects were numerous, each more implausible than the last. George Kelly, the visiting preacher, was among those questioned, his eccentric behavior drawing suspicion. There were whispers of a transient serial killer, a phantom who rode the rails, leaving death in his wake. Others suspected a personal vendetta, a business deal gone wrong, or even a political conspiracy. But despite the theories, no one was ever convicted. The case grew colder with each passing year, the memories of that night fading like whispers in the wind. Yet the house at 508 East 2nd Street remained, a silent witness to the unspeakable acts that had transpired within its walls. The people of Villisca moved on, but the shadow of the Moore family's tragic end lingered, a reminder of the evil that could lurk behind even the most familiar of faces. Today, the house stands as a grim monument to one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Visitors speak of strange occurrences, footsteps in empty rooms, doors that open on their own, the faint echo of children's laughter cut short by an abrupt silence. The story of the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters is one that refuses to be forgotten, a dark chapter in the history of Villisca, Iowa. So could this home now hold the spirits of the Moore family, forever walking its halls? Let me know in the comments. With that, keep your doors locked, your loved ones close, and never forget that sometimes, the monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They're the ones walking down the hall.